Okay. Hello everybody, and welcome to our final session of Intro to Photography. Yeah, it's coming to an end. So, we've got loads of people in the chat here. Perfect. Good to see you all. Good morning, guys. Hope you're well this morning. All right, guys. So, I thought for this session, because obviously we covered quite a bit over the last few weeks, so I figured instead of putting even more content out there, and you're not being able to retain too much of it just because you're overwhelmed by it. Like I thought, it would be better if we just kind of reviewed some of the stuff that we looked at for the first session, just so that we can make sure that we know exactly what's what with it, because I think that we've got a lot of the essential stuff down there. So perfect. And then the second half of the session, what we are going to do is um, we're going to look at some of the pictures that we took during the beach trip that we did, and then after that, we are going to look at some of my kit. So I'm going to get the kit out, and I'll give you guys a bit of a walkthrough, and I'm also going to be testing your knowledge in that, because I'm going to ask you what everything is, or what if you can guess what each item of my kit is, and if you can, then there's bonus points for you there. So yeah, I got your email, Charlotte. I just read that there. And yeah, so I'll be sure to kind of I'm gonna just make sure that I've got all of your pictures together organized. I still need to upload some, so I'll do that. I'll upload the pictures that Sue and Amelia took as well on our cameras. So I'll get that done too. All good, guys. So if you guys are about ready, then we'll start to go through this. We're going to go through the PowerPoint that we did for the taster session, because I know that I think that today is a really good lesson. If you haven't caught, if there's some lessons that you didn't catch at all, we'll go through it a bit quicker than normally. But if there's any of the lessons that you didn't catch, now is a good opportunity for you to watch this lesson, because we're going to go through each of the presentations. As I said, we'll go through a little bit faster than we initially did, but just so we can cover them all. And if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to write that in the chat, and then I'll get back to you and I'll let you know. But yeah, if that's about it, then I will proceed. And obviously, we've done this once before, guys, so you guys should know um, all of the answers. That's what I'm expecting. So yeah, and we'll go through the quizzes again too. So okie dokie, guys. So we'll get started then. So guys, yes, intro to photography, and yeah, so some of the stuff we're going to look at here is rule of thirds, focus, a portrait versus landscape, so the difference between those two. We're going to look at focus, zoom, exposure, and lighting, camera steadiness, which is important, burst mode, perspective, and leading lines. Okay, so first things first, this beach shot here, this might remind you of us the other day when we went to the beach to take some shots. Let's have a look. Oh wow, I'm so sorry to hear that you were in a car crash, guys. Hopefully you're all right and that you didn't get hurt. Um, but yeah, that's absolutely fine, Amelia. Don't worry about that. As long as I know you guys are listening, so that's awesome. I appreciate that. But yeah, hopefully you guys didn't get hurt, and hopefully you can pick up those car parts all right. So yeah, guys, as you can see here, you've got the horizon line there, right in the middle on that grid. Obviously, we talked about how to turn grid view on if it's a smartphone or if it's your camera as well. And it's just saying that you should position the most important elements off center rather than in the middle of the frame. Obviously, we talked about center framing, and it does have its place, given the context. If it's an image that's dealing with, a particular amount of symmetry that you're trying to go for. But yeah, generally speaking, off center is usually better. If we wanted to make this image, perfect, maybe we would have that bird there just in that top third there, and then I think that would look really nice. Um, Using the grid, obviously we spoke about grid view. They've hid him behind the sun. I don't know. Obviously, we learned a little bit about lighting. If you do have a light source which is hitting hard on that side, it is going to silhouette your subject. So that's something to bear in mind, guys. And that framing's absolutely lovely. Um, so yeah, you're getting them real cheap. Okay, I'm happy to hear that, guys. That's perfect. And let's have a little look here. All right, so going down. So yeah, portrait is useful for taking pictures of tall objects and for capturing personal portraits, pictures of people. So we've looked at portrait orientation in phones before. By the way, guys, if at any point, obviously, as I said, because I know this was something we've looked at before, so I'm spending a little bit less time on it. But if there's anything that I go over that you think, oh, Daniel, you went over that slide a little bit too fast, just let me know. Obviously, it is slightly faster than the first time just because it is revision. But like I'm saying, if there's at any point you kind of feel like you missed a slide and you want to kind of have another look at it, just let me know and we can go over it again. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so yeah, portrait guys, you know that you can even take portrait shots on your camera by just kind of adjusting the aspect ratio of your camera. You don't actually have to tilt your camera that way. You can have your camera that way and take a portrait. That's absolutely fine, and it will change the orientation. However, in your camera settings, you should be able to change your aspect ratio. You will have a few different settings that you've got, which is going to kind of affect how it's going to look. You're going to have it either widescreen, or you're going to have it, something like 4:3, where it's slightly wider but still quite square. Or you could have a 1:1, which is exactly square, or you could have it even smaller than that, which is going to be more portrait. So yeah, it depends, guys, on your aspect ratio and your actual orientation. So landscape, as it says, is useful for taking pictures of wide object and not surprisingly, landscapes. Portraits are useful for taking pictures of tall objects and for personal portraits. So there's the difference there, guys. However, they can cross over, as you can see. So if we look here, guys, you've got a portrait shot of a landscape, and look how good that is. You can see that I know we spoke about this before, and we asked in the chat. Hey Linda, thank you for stopping by. As I was just saying, Linda, if you've missed any of the sessions at all, you're in luck because we're doing a bit of revision today. We're going to cover all of the kind of presentations that we've done over the course in the first half of the lesson, and then following that, we're going to look at some of my kit. I'm going to get the kit out, and we're going to test your knowledge on it. And we're going to have a look at some of the pictures that you guys have took um, recently. Have you guys either took on the trip or that you sent after the trip? I know that Linda, you sent me a couple of pictures on your route, your little trip down to South Shields. So there we go, we've got that as well. All right, but good morning, Linda. So yeah, guys, obviously, I asked you guys if you prefer the one on the right or the one on the left. Obviously, the one on the right is landscape. The one on the left is portrait. Personally, if you asked me, I would generally say that neither of them are wrong, and they both add their own kind of thing. Like you've got the actual leading lines of the side of the barrier here, but I would say that personally, I prefer the portrait one. The reason for that is just because you've got this really strong leading line of the yellow marker right here, and it's pushing you right into that center point there. So I would definitely say that I prefer the portrait one. I feel like it crushes the space a little bit nicer. Um, and I just feel like it's a slightly stronger image, but that's an opinion. You may prefer the right one, and that's not necessarily wrong. It's just a matter of opinion. Um, okay, onwards, guys. Focus. So most modern smartphones cameras use autofocus. So you may have used that before, guys. And however, it doesn't always focus where you want it to, as you might remember. So it says you can activate manual focus. You compose your shot and tap on the screen where you want to get your focus, and then you're all set, guys. So if you remember, on any smartphone, any kind of modern smartphone, this will be the case. Literally, all you have to do is just tap on the area that you want to focus, and then it should start to autofocus on that area. On a lot of phones as well, to adjust the aperture, you would tap and then you would drag your thumb up or down, and that is going to move the aperture. It's going to either widen the aperture or lower the aperture, so or close the aperture rather, or slightly lower it. So yeah, and it says so yeah, that's one to bear in mind for smartphones. I think definitely. I think that's if you want to rapidly improve your smartphone photography. I think utilizing this focus feature is going to really help because not only does it help you focus, but it'll also help you exposure because it should also when you click on it, it'll help to expose to the thing that you're clicking on because it'll say that that's the focal point. So that's something to bear in mind too. So especially if you're shooting against a window, obviously I've told you guys you should not usually do that. You shouldn't usually place your subject in front of a window because your camera's going to have a difficult time exposing between the two. You're either going to be overexposed or underexposed. So however, if that was the case, you didn't have a choice, then you could take the picture. You could click on the person instead of the window, and it's going to expose for them. It's not going to expose for the window, so that's something to bear in mind as well. If you are using a smartphone. All right, guys, and let's have a look. Yeah, you're getting the parts for the car real cheap. I'm happy to hear that, guys. So depth of field. We spoke about depth of field. So that's focus. You can focus on something in the foreground with a background out of focus, or you can focus on something in the background with a foreground out of focus. So that is shallow depth of field in particular there, guys. So if you look, you can see how that's crushed the background. And that must be, as we were looked at in some of the later sessions, there must be a really, really low f-stop there to be able to get that so really wide aperture to be able to capture that much of a shallow depth of field because all of the background colors are completely crushed and that leaf is in view. So yeah, but you could also do that with a background. If you wanted to be out of focus and you want the background to be in focus, you could also do that. Onwards, guys. Um, so yeah, looking at some of the different types um, of depth of field, it would depending on the actual model of your phone, it's going to have a different camera inbuilt. So here is a few different. So here's a few different camera types here, guys, and the effect that you get with those cameras. So yeah, you can see that maybe I would say my favorite two there are maybe the Hasselblad. Seems to be nice. He's got like a nice shallow depth of field around him, and the iPhone X I think looks pretty sweet as well. So I think the Note 8's a little bit overexposed, and the Pixel 2 looks okay, but I think that I'm not a big fan of the colors in that one. I mean, it does look alright, but bear in mind as well, guys, we did speak about the like there is like an like a can't remember what it's called now, but in your if you've got an iPhone or if you've got an Android phone, there should be a setting where you can kind of have selective focus so you can imitate a shallow depth of field effect by putting something on your phone. You know that it should be on one of the settings. Anybody can remember the name of that? Give me a shout because it's escaping me right now. Okay, guys. Zoom. So avoid using the zoom feature on your smartphone camera unless it has the telephoto lens, guys. So we spoke about that before. And these are some cameras that do have a telephoto lens. You'll know if you have it or not. Basically, if your camera has three lenses on the back, then you probably one of those will be a telephoto. So one would usually be your wide lens, one would be your standard lens, and then one would be your telephoto lens, which is also your zoom lens. So this lens is specifically designed to capture high quality zoomed in shots without it affecting the quality of the shot. So like as we were saying, if you've got a phone which has a digital zoom, you can kind of use your gestures to like zoom in on it, but that's just kind of magnifying the image, it's enhancing it. Whereas if you're switching lenses, it's going to a lens with a different magnification, so that lens is supposed to be that zoomed in, whereas you might have a wide lens which is zooming in digitally on it, and it's just going to destroy the quality of it ultimately. So yeah, I would try to avoid zoom because it's going to damage you. The quality is not going to be great unless you have that telephoto lens. Um, and if you're using a camera, you'll know if you've got a telephoto lens or not. Some cameras, like digital cameras, Some of them, their digital zoom is slightly better. The quality doesn't grade as much, but it's still no way. It's never going to compare to a telephoto lens. Okay, so exposure and lighting, guys. So yeah, the difference in these three images here is that obviously one is underexposed, where it's going to be too dark. It's called underexposed. When you start to get the dark areas in your image, you can't make certain stuff out. You're losing some quality. Um, I think it's called portrait mode on your phone. It's selective focus on the Samsung. So cheers, guys. So cheers, Gary. And cheers, Charlotte. There, yeah. So on everyone's phone, it'll probably be called something different. But if you've got a relatively new smartphone, we're talking the last 3-4 years, and maybe beyond that, depending on if it's a high-end smartphone for the time, you will have that mode. Even if you don't have a smartphone, I mean, sorry, if you don't have a higher price smartphone, or if you've got like a slightly older smartphone, even on something like Instagram, there is a mode called, if you look under the filters on Instagram, if you're taking a selfie, there is a mode called focus, and that has the same effect, where it imitates the shallow depth of field. It can be a nice, it's the simulated shallow depth of field is never going to be as good as if you actually create like a real shallow depth of field. However, it can still be quite nice just to get a quick snap sometimes. So yeah, thank you guys for those shout outs there. Um, as I was saying, yeah, the correctly exposed one there is in the middle, obviously, as you can see, where we can see all parts of the image. It's not too bright, it's not too dark. Ultimately, that's what correct exposure would be. And overexposed is where you see people do this all the time. You will have definitely seen people do this in pictures. A lot of people do this in selfies for some reason, because they think if their face is overexposed, that their eyes kind of pop out more, maybe. But then you start to see that they don't have a nose, and like they start to lose like parts of their face. So yeah, watch out for overexposure. Okie dokie. Yeah, so we've got exposure and lighting, guys. And the way that you would get that on an iPhone is you would go iPhone into your camera, tap to set your focus, and then you can, as we were talking about before, you can swipe up or down, and that is going to change your exposure. On an Android, you would go into the camera, press settings, and then you would press exposure value. However, that will differ depending on your model. So obviously, depending on which camera you have, it's going to be totally different. Um, and yeah, the amount of light in your shot will dictate how much you need to adjust the exposure by. Obviously, um, try to use, as I've mentioned before, try to use the natural light as much as possible. So, like, if, for example, if you're in a room and you're taking a picture of somebody, and you're like, okay, it's a little bit dark, so I'll adjust the exposure. Try to use the light before you do that. So try to think, okay, I can turn this light on, or I can open that window, or I can frame this person in a different place. Try to think about using those different techniques, because you're going to give them some more natural light, which is, if they're going to have a better light source around them, they're just going to have better exposure anyway, instead of adjusting it through the settings, because you may not have the same quality if you're adjusting your exposure in camera. So that's something to think about as well, guys. Camera steadiness. So this can make or break your shot. Having a steady hand or tripod. Obviously, we spoke about tripods before, guys, and we talked about the importance of tripods. Here you are again, guys. Like, this is so crucial that you've got a tripod to stabilize your image. And there is multi different purposes for why a tripod is good. Camera steadiness is one, because if you've got a blurry image like this, sometimes it can add a bit of atmosphere if it's intentional. But if you're not intending to do it, it can be a real bummer, because it can totally ruin your image. So yeah, we spoke, even a monopod, guys. Like, I use a monopod a lot of the time when I'm out and about, and you guys know how useful that's been for me. I've got my smartphone tripod here, smartphone monopod here, my selfie stick. So there you go, guys. I think this actually is a tripod, right? Yeah, it is a tripod. So yeah, it is a smartphone tripod here, guys. So there you go. And I showed you guys this before, but I mean, I think we got this on Amazon for like £10. Obviously, we'll look at.
I think we got given that one, to be honest.
I think we got given this one, yeah. So
but yeah, I think it was about 10,
about
12, 10, 12
10 £12 on Amazon, and it's good. You know, it literally it's spring loaded, so it's not like, oh, is this going to fit my phone? It'll fit any phone.
Oh, I found something out with that one
Right?
actually. So
Sure.
you see, there's a button on it, the thing that comes off.
Yep.
That is a Bluetooth device, and you connect to it on your phone.
Yeah.
And then when you press that button, it takes a picture.
Oh wow.
So you can buy them with that, so that if you can be miles away and you can press it like from another side.
So good.
Pretty cool.
So yeah, guys, I don't know if you guys could see it. Just to echo what Haytham said there, there's a button on it right there, right? That comes off. That's actually a Bluetooth device that you can. I mean, you probably heard from there, but that's a Bluetooth device that you can link up to your phone, and you could set your tripod up, and then you could go away from the image, or even if you wanted to be in the picture, you know what I mean? If you were thinking like, I actually want to be in this picture, then you could go around and be in it. So it's a group picture, and then you can press the button on your Bluetooth device on that, and it's going to take the picture for you. So that is absolutely brilliant there. So, you know, for something that's like 10, 12 quid, 10, 12, you can't really go wrong. Obviously, we're going to have a look at more kit in a bit more detail in the second half of the session. But once again, I mean, that is just a good bit of kit there. Alrighty, so let's have a look. Burst mode, obviously, depending on what camera or phone you're using, they will all have a burst mode feature. I think that burst mode's on even the most basic smartphones usually and the most basic cameras. How effective it is a different question, but it's ideal for capturing action shots, obviously, when the subject's moving. And you can get multiple images in a row. So if you're covering kind of sports, or you know, something's happening, some wildlife came into the scene, it can be really useful. It's going to take several shots all at once. And usually on a smartphone, if you hold the button, which would take a picture, if you hold that, it'll do a burst mode effect. On my DSLR, it's on the top left hand side. You just twist it, and it has a picture of like a bunch of different frames. I'll show you guys in the second half of the session, and that is like the burst mode for that camera. So yeah, it depends on what you're using, but they'll generally all have a burst mode. All right, so perspective and leading lines. Obviously, this is something that Amelia and Andy have been really good at throughout the course. It is framing generally in general, guys. You can see perspective is great. Obviously, as I was saying, it's a lot of photography is showing people stuff that they've seen before, but in a way that they've never seen before. Okay, so literally, if you lie on the ground and you look up and take a picture of the way that the trees look, you're going to get an image like the one on the left, and that's an amazing picture. And you know, it is what it is. It looks great, but it's probably quite simple. It's just someone lying on the floor, but it's like getting to do that. You could even get this kind of effect by going right next to the edge of a building, from the ground, not like from the top, and you could look up and then take a picture of the angle at the top. You're gonna get a similar kind of effect. The second one here is framing. It's more about the framing. We've talked about how framing can be important. It's finding natural frames to fit stuff in. Okay, and as I was saying, that Andy and Amelia have done some really good stuff with this, kind of finding natural frames in their environment which kind of drag you into a focal point. That focal point could be a person sitting down, it could be anything. But yeah, so find natural kind of frames to fit your image as well, through windows, through doors, so on. They're usually great for that kind of stuff. And perspective in leading lines. Let's have a little look. Okay, cool. So yeah, as we were saying, leading lines lead your attention from the foreground to the background of your image, guys, and they can create depth in your image. So even though you might feel like this is kind of cutting stuff off, you can see the leading lines going along there. This person's obviously went for a portrait orientation because they want to kind of have that leading line to be as long as possible. The one on the right here, you see you've got that leading line which goes through the middle of the image, which is quite nice, shows that separation. And the one here, it's also, as I was saying, central placement is something that we tend to refrain from, but it does have its place. I mean, this is a great example of that. You can see that you've got these convergent lines here, two leading lines leading you to the central focal point right there. And once again, that's a lot to do with symmetry. So obviously you've got two trees, which is symmetrical in terms of them being two parallel lines, and they ultimately create something like this, which gives you that kind of convergent lines effect, which is really, really nice. So central placement does have its place depending on how you utilize it. Negative space, guys. We spoke about negative space before. It can be useful when you want to make your images more dramatic while putting emphasis on your main subject. It can be used in a lot of different ways. Um, it's one of the easiest ways to achieve simplicity in your compositions. Having large expanses of empty space helps your subjects stand out, and it can create more natural balance. It's simply the area around and between the objects in an image. The objects themselves are referred to as the positive space. We've got some examples here. So as you can see, guys, got usually it's got stuff to do, not always, but with the direction of movement as well. So he is moving into the positive space, and the space behind him is what we would call the negative space. Obviously, we've got him on the line there. So negative space, although the word is negative, it's not always a bad thing. It's literally just another thing. It's like, so you can see that he's on that rule of third there. So it's actually maybe a little bit better for him to have some more negative space. However, no, I asked you guys which one you thought was better, and I think that we were pretty much split on votes. I think some of you like the right hand side one, which is slightly more in line with the rule of thirds, and some of you like the left hand side one because you feel like you have more kind of space to move into. So yeah, like I said, neither one is wrong, and it is just a matter of preference once again. But yeah, obviously that just to kind of illuminate that point, that's more negative space on the left, and on the right, sorry, there's more negative space there, and then a little bit less on the left, but with more positive space. Alrighty. Just to give you one more example of negative space, if you took a picture of a person, but their eye line was looking to the left, they're looking into the positive space probably, and then behind them where the head is, that would be the negative space. So, yeah. Okie dokie. Direction of movement obviously ties in a little bit. So, leaving room for implied movement of your subject is important in creating a composition that doesn't express tension. So yeah, if you've cut your image off, if your eye line is looking to the right, but that's where your image ends also, it can make the audience feel quite uncomfortable because you feel like they're kind of squished into the frame, and you're very curious like what's going to be on that right hand side. So it's something to bear in mind. So it doesn't just apply to people looking a certain way. They could look left down, right or up, or it could actually be a person moving. So it could be, direction movement could be a number of different things. So yeah, it depends. Sometimes people use direction of movement to create like uneasiness, like in horror films, but that can be quite unconventional. So to avoid that, you want to kind of have it so that you've got more space for your image to move into. So I think that you guys have obviously been doing that. I've noticed it when we were out on the beach shoot. We were taking some pictures of some joggers that went past, just in the moment, and obviously we were applying that rule there. So I think that definitely works. And I'll show you an example of that now. Obviously, we had the birds on the beach. It's kind of fitting that there's a beach shot here because we probably got some similar shots when we were out and about on the beach there. So yeah, you've got that nice thing there. You can see that he's got plenty of space to move into, and then obviously it is quite in line with the rule of thirds as well. On here, you've got the surface divider of the tree, which looks quite nice, but then you've also got them moving that space, and as you can see, the tree is kind of in line with the rule of thirds as well, so that's pretty good. So all good, guys. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna move on. Next one here, some shadows. So yeah, I've seen you guys get some nice pictures with some stuff um, from shadows. I've seen that everyone in the photography class has got some nice kind of shadowy shots, which is really cool. I know that springing to mind, Linda got some really good shots with some shadows, which I thought were really cool. Um, and yeah, it's something. And I know that Amelia was thinking about shadows a lot last time we were out. She was trying to get some shots with some shadows, so that's perfect as well. So yeah, it's something to be mindful of because it's something that not a lot of people think about, but you can also get like a really nice image with it. It can create good abstract images. You know, when you pay attention to the shadows, obviously Charlotte's really good with abstract images. So you just need to keep your eyes peeled for different kind of patterns that are created by railings and so on. But not only that, guys, but like you will like happens to me so often, and it will probably happen to you guys. But whenever the sun kind of comes through a window, and you'll notice if you've got blinds or something, and the way sun comes through a window, and then you might look at, your friend or whoever, and you can see that they've got these kind of lines across their face, and I mean that is such a great natural effect, and that would be a perfect opportunity as well. Filling the entire frame. I seen that Lee got some good pictures with some frame filling, and this is what I was talking about with just populating your frame there. It could be anything. It could be something quite abstract like this one on the right here, where it could just be something up close that creates like this kind of effect, and then there could be something, a little bit more scenic like that, I guess. Oh, excuse me. So yeah, it's useful for similar objects and patterns, and just consider how high or low the camera is while taking these kind of shots because you might need it low or high just depending on how you're going to capture it because these kind of things you might need to be quite close usually. Getting close up detail, which is interesting that leads on to this one, and that's for capturing intricate details. Obviously, we spoke about macro lenses, you guys will probably remember, and a little bit about how macro lenses are probably the best kind of lens to capture something like this. You're not always going to be able to get that close, like the one on the left there. You'd be hard pressed to get that close with a smartphone. You might, but it would be more difficult. Whereas if you bought a macro lens, you would be able to get these kind of very abstract images of these kind of patterns. Um, but you'd obviously need a camera as well, or maybe you might be able to get a macro lens for your smartphone, like an adapter. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it might be worth looking into. Close-ups in portraits. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make when taking photos is not getting close enough to the subject, because you see, the closer you get, you can capture some emotion. Um, and when you're quite far away, you obviously don't capture that, or you're not able to. So you'll never be able to get those amazing details, colors, colors, and textures that bring your photos to life. So you can see that level of detail that comes into play when you get like a nice close up. So yeah, guys, as we spoke about before, we've got central placement, central subject placement here. And yeah, as a general rule, centering a subject can lead to a flat, dull feeling image. There's a lack of tension, and the eye tends to get bored. But now and again, placing your subject within the frame centrally can create a very strong composition, and it works well for symmetrical subjects. So one of my favorite filmmakers is a guy called Wes Anderson, and it is something that is very much in his arsenal. Like he does it almost all the time. And I'm not sure what's just happened there. Sorry. Oh my goodness, going crazy. And that's the one. That's what you want. There you go. All right. So yes, so sorry about that, guys. Um, yeah, as you can see, we've got these different kind of central subject ideas here. We've got his hands there, which is very intentional by the director to create that symmetrical effect. You've got everything in there is symmetrical, except maybe the pictures, but you do have them on both sides. You can see that she's centrally placed right in the door frame. You've got the symmetry there. You've got the pictures on each side with the two desks. Once again, you've got this concierge with the two banners. Um, his office even has that central placement effect. You've got Edward Norton, which has that central place effect there, and you've got this nice bit of symmetry around here as well. So it's definitely something to kind of look out for, guys. Um, but once again, you need to kind of be conscious of your image, let's say. Okie dokie, guys. So if you look here, we've got these different kinds of light. You remember, guys, we studied light quite a bit throughout this course because it's something that I think is not taught about enough. It's not taught enough in photography and videography classes. Lighting is so, so, so important, and if you can master lighting, you can take a good picture even with a bad camera. I really do believe that. Um, and I've always been a very big fan of lighting. And I just wanted to kind of illuminate that idea. So here we do have some different kind of lighting effects here, and guys, you'll be able to kind of see that the difference that it makes with these different things. Now they can actually be used for different purposes. If you're making a horror film, maybe you want to do just have that hard light on someone, which might be a down top lit, so they might be just lit from down. But generally speaking, that is not a very attractive image, and it's not what you want. Obviously, I've spoken about this with you guys. You'll see like a million times how important that how bad, if you like to take selfies at all, or just even take pictures of people, and you always think like, God, these look so bad. It's like usually it's your house lighting because it's top light, it's top lit, and it's usually be like like a really bad light bulb, which will give you like an orange glow, like a tungsten light, and it's just lighting you down, and it's just not nice. Top lighting's not nice, and that orange glow is not nice as well. So if you could turn that off and you could use a natural light source, or if you had like an LED, you could come out with something like this, like the soft light and the fill light. I think looks quite nice here, as does the hard light plus fill light, gives him a bit of definition. Soft light, he's looking a bit underexposed there, um, because there's not enough light source getting to him. Um, Go beyond this, guys. The exposure triangle. Now, this is something that we covered quite a bit. We had a whole lesson on this almost. We'll look at that. I'm not actually going to go into it here, because we're going to go on to the next slide. We're going to go on to the next presentation shortly, which is where we will cover it in more detail. But this is something that I hope you guys have remembered. Um, yeah, we'll cover this in more detail on the next slide. Um, okay, so depth of field, obviously you guys know how important that is, and you know how it can make such a different effect. Obviously, you've got this image here where the depth of field. Did he have a haircut in these two different pictures? Okay, you just not see his hair on that side. You can see the sharp depth of field there. You can see the whole fence and the ripples in the fence. You can see shallow depth of field here, which is where that's all kind of blurry with this is in focus. And so narrow the aperture by making it smaller. So you increase the f-stop. I know that sounds, it's because you have to increase the f-stop to make it smaller. So you've got a high f-stop but a small aperture. Okay, I know that's confusing, but you will get it eventually. You've got to move away from the subject. You can't be too close to get those kind of shots usually. And you need to use a lens of a shorter focal length. So yeah, decreasing the depth of field for blur. So that's if you have it sharp, guys. That's if you have like a sharp image, it'll be like that. And then if you want to decrease the depth of field for blur, so you want to have a nice shallow depth of field, as we call it, you need to widen the aperture. You need to make it big as possible, so decrease the f-stop. And you need to move closer to the subject, so you need to be quite close. And you need a lens with a long focal length. Can get it with a lens with a shorter focal length, but it's optimal. So you can get these quite easy with zoom lenses, but at the same time, the zoom lenses have their own issues. So like as I said, I don't recommend zoom lenses for beginners unless you really would get the use out of it. I think your first lens that you should buy should be a standard lens, so around 50 mm. That's just my opinion. 35 to 50 mm, I think would be perfect for a beginner. and then you can maybe move on to zoom lenses. Got the mini quiz, guys. Let's go. Okay, let's go, guys. We're gonna smash through this, and then we're gonna do another slide. Obviously, we don't have the tasks, so yeah. So, guys, let's see who can remember. Okay, obviously, I know we whizzed through that, but it's content that we've done before, so I know that you guys, you know the score. All right, guys. So, who can tell me what is the rule of thirds? Let's see. Who's been listening? What is the rule of thirds, guys? Let's have a little look. All right, guys. If you need a hand, I want to tell you it is the rule of thirds. A grid-based composition for your phone can be for your phone, can also be for your camera. Oh, it's for your, sorry, I don't know why I read photos there. Phone, sorry, Charlotte. You said a grid-based composition for your photos. So sorry, you're right. Grid divided into squares with interest points for intersections. Great, great input there, Lee, as well. So you guys are both right. Yeah, that is a rule of thirds, and you want to be on that either one of those 2/3. Generally, you're going to get the best images when you're shooting stuff on the rule of thirds. It's just standard, and it's always going to look good. And guys, what is one negative and one benefit of center placement in photography, guys? Can you tell me that? What is one negative and one benefit of center placement in photography, guys? Good job, by the way, Lee and Charlotte there. Let's see. Let's see, guys. Yes, so brilliant, good answer there, Lee. Perfect. It can be a boring composition if you have it. It can be flat. It can be really flat, uh, but it can also add emphasis to an image. So I would suggest, guys, primarily, whenever you're using center placement, you want a lot of depth in your image. You always want depth. So you want to make sure that the symmetry behind the target or behind the subject, but it can be flat. So one negative, it can make your photos um, sometimes uninteresting. Yeah, it can. It can be flat and it can be dull, but it can be useful if you've got a lot of depth, as I was saying. So yeah, going on to the next question then. What is depth of field, guys? What's depth of field? So, okay, guys. So depth of field is when it is the it could be either sharp or it could be shallow. So you can have a shallow depth of field, which is where you can have a bit of blur. So shallow or deep focus, exactly right. Beautifully summed up, Lee. So you can either have one part in focus and one part is blurry. So that would be shallow depth of field. So you're absolutely right, Charlotte. But you can also have a deep depth of field, which is where everything would be in focus as well. So yeah, it can be shallow or deep. So brilliant there, Lee. Good stuff, mate. And okay, why is direction of movement important, guys? Let's have a look at that. So why is direction of movement important? So guys, to kind of go into it, direction of movement is important because, excuse me, randomology attack, is because um, you've got, yeah, to help tell the story in the photo. Yeah, definitely, that's a good answer. I can take that 100%. So you've got space for your image to move into, you know. So direction movement can be important to kind of give your subject space to move into. We know automatically when we see that image, we know that they're going in that direction, and we know where they're going. And why is negative space important, guys? Kind of the opposite of the answer there. Negative space is important, guys, because it gives you some kind of space from. It can help you. It can stop you from feeling uncomfortable. It can give your subject in your frame a little bit of breathing room if you can utilize the negative space effectively. But it can also create the opposite effect if you want to create like a claustrophobic kind of effect. You can also do that by utilizing negative space. Really briefly, guys, what is the exposure triangle? It's three different things. Who can tell me what the exposure triangle is? Good, perfectly. Good job, mate. It is aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. They are the things that that is what your exposure triangle is comprised of. Those three different things. Perfect answer, Lee. There, mate. Good job. So yeah, the two here. I'm going to whiz through these because I want to move on to the next slide. So leading lines. What can they be used for? To draw you to the focal point of the image, basically. So it can be to draw you to the focal point to create kind of depth in your image. And what is the difference between portrait and landscape? One is used for portrait, one is used for landscapes. It's either like that or like that, vertical or horizontal, guys. Vertical or horizontal, sorry. So that's the difference there, guys. We're going to move on to the next slide now. I want you guys to pay attention to this one, obviously, because this is going to be useful in the second half of the session when we look at some of the different kit and things like that. So stay tuned for that, guys. All right. So I'm just going to go to a quick break screen while I switch this over. I'll be like literally 2.8 seconds. Okay, dokie, guys. Thank you for bearing with me there just while I switched the slides. Going into session 2 now. We're going to go through this one. We might get onto the third one. We might just not have enough time, but we'll see how we get on. Good job, everybody, so far. You guys are doing great. And this one is going to kind of be important when coming into our next our next half of the session following this. Okay, so yeah, so got a nice cup of coffee there. Okay, the exposure triangle. So yes, we'll break it down a little bit now. And actually, let's have a quick look here. We don't have actually. We're gonna look at the kit on the next bit. Okay, so ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. That is what the exposure triangle is. Sorry. Um, and these three different things all affect your brightness, okay? So the wider your aperture, the brighter the image is. The lower your ISO, the brighter the image. Oh no, sorry, the higher your ISO, the brighter your image is, and also the lower your shutter speed, the brighter it is. So when you can't change one of these without affecting the brightness and ultimately affecting the exposure. Okay, so if you've ever got your image and you think it doesn't look right, try playing with all these three things. It's never going to be a one size fits all kind of thing. You're never going to be able to have one setting that's perfect for everything. It's always dependent on your environment and your subject, your placement, your focal point. All of those things affect what setting's going to work for you. So I can't say like this is the setting that you should have for everything because it's always going to change. So that's why the most important part about photography is really getting out and taking pictures, because it's ultimately something that you learn by habit. Um, and obviously, the theory can help to a big extent, but ultimately, the only thing that's going to actually fully improve your photography is if you get out and practice the stuff that you've learned. So, and once again, though, that is not a big ask because you can literally get out and do that with your smartphone. And honestly, that'll improve your photography overall with a camera. Just because you're going to be learning composition, you're going to be learning about lighting and natural lighting. So don't feel discouraged if you don't have a big expensive camera because you can still do quite a bit with a smartphone. But then also at the same time, um, don't be discouraged hearing that if you have a camera because obviously a camera is that next level up. And as good as a smartphone may get, it'll never get as good as a good DSLR. It's just simply not possible. I don't think. In terms of just the amount of um, flexibility that you have with a camera, in terms of how you can, when you can master the manual elements, should we say that it's incomparable, really. Anyway, guys, so shutter speed is a good way to understand how shutter speed is. Think of your eye closing and opening. Basically, your shutter speed is just the length of time your camera is open, exposing light onto the sensor, and essentially it's how long your camera spends to take a photo. So it's like your shutter is a thing that sits on top of your camera like that, and when you take a picture, it'll go like that, and that could be like a long picture like that, and then that'll have took the picture, or it could be like that. Okay, so that is literally your shutter opening and closing, or it could be opening and then closing like that. And how fast your shutter speed is gonna depend on, like, obviously if you've got a fast shutter, you might be able to capture stuff. Well, we're gonna move. Well, actually, we'll go into detail that now, so I can talk about it as we go through it. But yeah, it can either basically effectively it can show motion, or it can also slow down time depending on how you use it. So slow shutter speed, guys, versus fast shutter speed. So slow or long shutter speed can take longer to capture an image and can produce things like motion blur. Photographers use this on purpose to enhance the sense of movement. Okay, so you can see the two different ones here, guys. This one here is obviously a slow shutter speed. It creates this nice motion blur, and I know that we were kind of practicing this a bit when we went out for the beach run, and it's great because um, obviously um, we didn't have the best environment to do it there. As I was saying, Andy was saying that he got a really good one because one of the things about shooting for like a low shutter speed is that you're gonna have to play around with your aperture almost definitely, because if you've got a really low shutter speed, you're gonna probably want to be on like base ISO, and you definitely, which is maybe like 200 100, and you're definitely going to want to play around with your aperture. So you might have it on like f-stop 10 8, something like that, because otherwise you can't really do it with a wide aperture unless you've got an ND filter, because it is going to massively put your brightness up. But yeah, uh, Andy, I remember, was saying that he got a really nice picture by taking a picture of some fire. He had like a campfire, and he got a nice slow shutter speed picture of that because obviously that's the only light source. So he was able to get a really low shutter speed and capture a nice motion blur on the fire, which sounds really good. But once again, a waterfall is also another opportunity to get those kind of shots, and you will see a lot of photographers do take shots of waterfalls with like a really low shutter speed, and it creates that nice motion blur effect, which you get there. Then the opposite of that is like your fast shutter speed, which you may come away with an image look at something like that where it's capturing a bit more of the detail, and it depends on what you want. As I was saying, I know Charlotte was getting some shots of the waves with like a really low shutter speed. Once again, they were quite still, so it was a little bit harder to get that like to fully get that show shutter speed effect. But I think she still captured quite nicely some of that, so I think that's quite cool, and it's good to kind of play around with that. Also, there's a couple of different effects here. So we've got the one on the left there, which once again is like the motion blur effect that we're talking about. Obviously, this is like some kind of windmill where the bottles are spinning around, but creating that motion blur can give you also a sense of motion. Well, the clues in the title obviously give you a sense of motion because you can see that when you see that motion blur, it looks like it's going fast. Obviously, that image once again is being captured with a very slow shutter speed, and it can give you that kind of effect. Whereas this dolphin on the right hand side is probably being captured with a very fast shutter speed to be able to capture the motion of the dolphin coming out of the water, because obviously that's a very very hard shot to get. But obviously don't be discouraged if you can't quite get shots like that, because you would need quite an expensive camera to capture a shot like that with such good quality. In the moment like that, it's very difficult. So yeah, that's the difference between your slow shutter speed and your fast shutter speed there, guys. So your aperture, your aperture is just the amount of light that you let into your camera. An aperture is the opening in a lens through which light passes to enter the camera, and it's similar to your eyes in the sense that you move between dark and bright environments. So it's like the iris in your eyes; it either expands or shrinks, controlling the size of your pupil. Like Diego just came in to pay us a visit, but he wasn't interested. So.
Move the door down.
Hello, Diego. Hello, boy. Hello, boy. Hello. I don't know if you guys can see Diego. There he is. Look at that boy. Hello. What's this? You gonna come and say hello?
No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't. Okay. So yeah, that was. I don't know. I think you caught a little glimpse of Diego there. I'm sure most of you guys have met Diego, our office dog, before. And so, as I was saying, guys, yeah, just the aperture is the amount of light that you let into the camera, and it's opening in your lens, which is where the light passes through. Okay, so I was saying that think about it like your eye. When you see people have big pupils, that's a very similar thing because that's the iris expanding to to go with the light, same as when people have small pupils. So it's you can think about it in that sense. And changing your aperture can affect the brightness and the depth of field of your image. And yeah, so as we spoke about, aperture is something that for people starting out, aperture is usually quite confusing. You just got to describe it. Okay, Amelia, no worries. That's absolutely fine. I would imagine that you guys will still be back for the second half of the session where we can look through some of the photos we all took and have a look at some of the kit together, which should be good fun as well. Okie dokie. So let's see. So yeah, aperture is the opening. Oh, sorry, I've just read that bit. Yeah. So one thing, as I was saying, that confuses beginners is usually the fact that is that if you've got a low f-stop, your aperture is wide. If you've got a high f-stop, your aperture is small. Okay, so that is really confusing. The idea that it's two different things like that, and I know that can be a bit confusing, but if you ever have any issues with that, you can always ask me. And it's just saying that small numbers represent large, and whereas large numbers represent small apertures. So it's a little bit tricky, but you get it in the end, guys. And it does. If you don't get it, it doesn't matter as long as it looks good. So as I was saying, it's a case of practice and being able to kind of look at it yourself. Okay, onwards, guys. So yeah, how aperture affects brightness. As aperture changes in size, it affects the overall amount of light that reaches your camera sensor and therefore the brightness of the image, guys. So if you look, we've got these three different ones here. We've got the large aperture here, which is going to be like probably like a 1.8 f-stop, let's say. If you look how overexposed that is, it looks pretty awful. But then if you look at the one in the middle here, it's got the medium aperture, which looks quite nice. That works perfectly for this. Obviously, it's another beach shot. We got to the beach and we got some really lovely photos. And then you got this one on the right hand side here, which is ultimately underexposed. It doesn't really give you too much other than that kind of underexposed feel. Just not really capturing anything, not really capturing the detail. So yeah, obviously the middle one is what you wanted to go for there. But as I was saying, it's not a one size fits all situation. This is going to depend on the day and how much light you're getting on the day. So how aperture affects your depth of field, guys? Massively. So the more you open up the aperture, the shallower your depth of field becomes. Whereas the more that you lower the aperture, the sharper the image becomes, guys. So if you look here, we've got a nice kind of illustration, which I think kind of illustrates that point a little bit better. You've got 2.8 f-stop, where you've got the cactus in view, and then you've got the trees at the back, which are kind of out of, they're kind of blurred. Obviously, you've got that nice depth of field there, and then you've got 16 f-stop here, and then you've got everything in kind of view there. So you be to be fair though, guys, you would maybe if you got 16 f-stop on, you might have like quite a dark image though if you got your aperture that low. So that's something to think about. 16 is, or unless it was like an ultimately like super bright day. But yeah, you're not going to get a very shallow depth of field obviously if you've got like 16 f-stop. So yeah, there's just to illustrate that point though. So there's a sharp depth of field and a shallow depth of field, and that's how the aperture kind of affects it. Okay, so we've got a little diagram here just to kind of illustrate it a bit more, which I think is pretty useful. And let's explain the f-stop a little bit better. So yes, you can see there that we've got, so if you didn't get this the first time we went through it, I think that now that we're going through it now, it should sink in a little bit better, just considering that we've actually been out, we've took photos, and we've like, you guys have seen it in action, so you might be able to get a better grasp on it now. But ultimately, guys, yeah, aperture, when it's wide, that'll be like a f-stop 1 or a 1.4. That's going to be very bright, and it's going to have a shallow depth of field. Then beyond that, if you've got like 2 to 2.8, slightly smaller aperture and less shallow depth of field, and it just continues in that way. 4 to 5.6, even less. Then you get in a very small aperture with like f8 all the way down to f22, and the depth of field is becoming sharper and sharper, but as is the image becoming darker and darker. So you guys might notice that when you've been taking pictures, that this has been the case for you, and this is probably something that you can use as a guideline as well. Obviously, guys, if you ever want to look back at anything that we look at in the session, you can always refer back to any of the PowerPoints, and it'll give you a bit more information. Okie dokie. So this, like I said, at the time I didn't really agree with it because I've got this picture. I didn't make this picture. This is something I got, but as I was saying, I think that you've got two separate examples here. You've got a large aperture with f4 here, and you've got the background nicely blurred, as it says here. And then you've got f22 with a small aperture, and it says the background is distracting. I don't think it is distracting. I think it actually looks quite nice here. I just think it's a very different effect. So you've got two separate effects there, and both have their own place. But on the left, it does have those kind of nice crushed green colors around it. So that is obviously right. But at the same time, I just think it's a different effect. It depends what you're going for on the right hand side there. Okie dokie, guys. Let's have a look. Right. So ISO is simply a camera setting that'll brighten or darken a photo. Obviously, I know that Charlotte has an interest in like film photography, and in film photography, you used to buy certain ISO film. So you would get like 400 ISO film, or you'd get like 800 ISO film, and that would be the film that you would actually shoot on. Um, but now on a camera it's usually an in-camera setting, but all different cameras have like a different base ISO. So some cameras will have like 100 base ISO, some cameras will have 200 ISO. um, so yes, basically it just brightens or darkens the picture, but raising your ISO does have its consequences. A photo taken at too high of an ISO will show a lot of grain, also known as noise, and it might not be usable, guys. So definitely that is something to be wary of if you when you open your ISO. I don't know if you guys will remember or not what I said was like the ISO that you should watch out for, but I was saying that if you go beyond 800 ISO is when you start to get some grain. I think if you go into the like 1200, I think maybe it is, I think that'll be okay. Um, but I think it's still going to show some grain. I think for photography that might be usable, but for video I would not recommend that, because when you're on video it is going to start to get a bit grainy and it's going to kind of damage your image. So originally ISO would be for film sensitivity, as I was talking about, and people would buy rolls of film of a certain ISO. Since then, DSLR cameras have used this to mimic an effect, as I was saying there, guys. So pretty interesting stuff, though, and obviously ISO can be a bit of a lifesaver sometimes, depending on what light you're battling with. In their common ISOs, guys, so you've got your different common ISO values, sometimes called ISO speeds, that you can use, and a common set is as follows, guys. So you've got 100 ISO, which is a low ISO, which is fine, and I think that's really nice. If you want to kind of get down a really low ISO, because it can be nice quality. 200 ISO, 400 ISO, 800, 1600, sorry, not 1200, 3200, and 6400, which is pretty massive. I've never ever seen anything taken on 600,400 ISO. Quite simply, when you double your ISO speed, you are doubling the brightness of the photo. So a photo at 400 ISO will be twice brighter than 200 ISO, and 200 ISO will be twice brighter than 100 ISO. So there you go, guys. Um, Base ISO. So base ISO, guys, is the lowest native ISO on your camera is your base ISO. This is very important, guys, because it gives you the potential to produce the highest image quality, minimizing the visibility of noise in your image, so as much as possible. So some older DSLRs and a number of modern cameras, such as the Fuji X2, have a base ISO of about 200, whereas most modern digital cameras have a base ISO of 100. Optimally, you should always try to stick to the base ISO to get the highest image quality, guys. However, it's not always possible to do so, especially when working in low light conditions. And as I said, I think that if you go up a little bit in your ISO, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's if you go up to 800, it's not going to make a difference at all. And I think that changing your ISO can sometimes be a better compromise than changing your aperture and losing the depth of field that you want, or so on. So it's definitely one to look at. Some cameras have a fixed ISO. You got an older camera, you might not actually even be able to change your ISO. So that's something to look at. I mean, even for digital, I mean. So yeah, here you go, guys. This is just to kind of illustrate the way that it interacts with the brightness. You've got this little figurine, I guess it is, of the Eiffel Tower, and this is how this image affects your brightness here, guys. So if you look 200 ISO, it is quite dark. It's maybe a little bit too dark. It looks quite underexposed there. 400 ISO, which is where it's showing the light. You see, the interesting thing here is that you've got actually obviously quite a blue background here, and the background looks literally a completely different color based on what level the ISO is at. So that is definitely something to think about. Um, So yeah, you've got 400 ISO there, which it looks okay, but maybe still a little bit underexposed, I guess. But I guess it's okay. I think that one's, I mean, it might be quite a dark statue, to be honest. And then you've got 800 ISO, which is where it's starting to look like a bit like a white background. It's not really overexposed because it just looks a little bit bright, maybe. And then you've got 1600, which showing a lot. It's showing a lot of detail on the tower, but it is starting to look somewhat overexposed. It looks very, very white in the background. But all of these, I would say, are passable. Maybe 200 doesn't look very good. Definitely looks underexposed. But you can just see the different effect it gives you. I mean, it literally goes from dark blue to white, which is interesting to see how that can actually change the color of a background. It's something that we don't often think about, but it's definitely worth taking into consideration there, guys, I would say. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting one to look out for as well there, guys. Okie dokie. So, we're going to move on a little bit, guys, onto our table here. We've got our nice kind of table here of all of the different types, and I definitely think it is worth covering this again. So obviously, if you have seen this before, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to go over and revise it, but I definitely recommend revising it because I think that it's not something that it's going to sink in the first time, and it is something that you kind of need to go over and kind of look at again and then practice, and then ultimately it will sink in. But definitely, guys, something that's worth kind of reviewing. And also, as I said, all of the videos are going to be available on the channel. So if you wanted to kind of look back and review any of these points, they are there. And if you actually email me, it might say I might not be able to get back to you immediately, but I do have copies of these things lying about. So if you wanted this guide or anything, if you email me, I should be able to send it over to you. So yeah, we're just going to kind of run through some of these different effects on here and actually how that they affect your camera, your image quality. Obviously, this is all part of the exposure triangle here. So as we were saying, that f32, I mean, that's like a pin, kind of that's like such a small ISO that it's unbelievable. And you can kind of see that f22 a sharp depth of field, f16 quite sharp, f11 it actually looks very slightly shallow in the background. Generally speaking, I would say that that's not the case. I would say that f11 is still going to be really, really sharp, as is f8. Even f5.6 probably going to get a tiny bit of blur, but it depends on the lens. F4 you might get a little bit of motion, you might get a little bit of shallow depth of field, and then f2.8 you definitely will, and then f2 you definitely will, and f1.4 it's going to be really crushed at the background, and you're only going to get this foreground in image. So f1.4 is quite low. I think the lowest the lowest f-stop our camera goes to is like 1.6. We've got a lens that does that, and on it's 1.7 actually, and even that looks like really, really shallow. Looks really nice. You can see, I don't know if I mentioned to you guys when we looked at this before, but like the difference between the same lens from, like, if you buy a lens that has 1.8 f-stop versus if you buy a lens that's got 1.6 f-stop, it's like an extra £60 or something, because people care that much about that kind of shallow depth of field look. They want that like kind of crushed image look so bad that they're willing to pay like an extra 50 or £60 just for that slight difference in f-stop. And that is actually that's honestly the truth. I saw that in the Canon lens, and they were both specs wise, they were almost identical except for like 0.2 of an f-stop, and the price is that much different. So it's pretty crazy, but that's actually how much of a demand there is for stuff like that. Okay, guys, so fast shutter speed here. You can see that 1,000 of one there. It looks super duper. That's going to be insane. That I can't imagine taking anything with that high of a shutter speed. And then one and 501, 250 and one to 250th, or 1 in 125, 1 in 60. You can see that you're starting to get a little bit of motion blur there. as we were speaking about. 1 in 30, you're getting quite a bit of motion blur. 1 in 15, you're getting like a huge amount of motion blur. So I don't know if you're still watching, Charlotte. You remember when we were taking pictures at Roger Beach last week? Um, as you noticed, when we got down to about 30, you will have probably noticed that you're starting to get a slight bit of motion blur there. And then when you went down to 15, I think you went down to, you're getting a pretty crazy amount of motion blur there. But obviously, at the same time as your shutter speed goes down, your aperture also gets lower, right? So your aperture, you're having to put your f-stop up to compensate for the brightness that comes into effect when you lower your shutter speed. Okay, so bear that in mind as well. So it's going to be quite difficult for you to get a shallow depth of field and a slow shutter at the same time, just because generally speaking, you're going to have to put your aperture up to match the brightness from that, unless you get an ND filter, which we're going to look at. I've actually got ND filters that I can show you, and we'll be looking at that in the second half. As I said, we'll be going through all of the kit. So an ND filter is going to be part of that. I'm going to bring the lights down. We're going to do the whole shebang. I'll set up the tripod. It should be good fun. Should be a good interactive lesson. Obviously, unfortunately, it's going to be via virtual. It's going to be virtual. I would have liked to have done the workshop in person. I mean, generally speaking, if we just as a brief tangent, if we do go ahead with the video production course quite soon, hopefully we can do that in person, and then we would actually be able to do like actual workshops. Like I'll be able to get you guys in, and we'll be able to practice shots on the lights. And obviously, I think that since we've learned the basics of how to use the cameras, I feel like doing the video production course would kind of complement that well. Just because using the DSLR and using the camera, they're all quite similar. If you were going to do video production, you would need to know f-stops, you'd need to know aperture, you'd need to know shutter speed. We'd maybe obviously have a couple of theory classes, just which are relevant to video solely, and we could also do a couple of workshops as well. And I could set you guys tasks. It would be quite fun. So I know that some of you registered a little bit of interest for that, but yes, that's something that's to look out for the future. So there, just to move on to ISO here, we've got the base ISO of 50. Like as I said last time, I think guys, I think that's a bit of a rarity. I've never seen like a ISO of 50 that's like super duper low. I mean, it probably exists, but it's not really something I've seen. And then I think that this is just for the sake of the diagram, but once again, um, I don't know if that's supposed to be like it's supposed to be noise, right? But the 100 ISO is the base ISO for this camera, I guess. Then you've got 200 ISO, which has like a substantial amount of noise. That's just not possible. On 200 ISO, you would never get any noise. I've never ever seen noise coming from 200 ISO. It's so this diagram is slightly wrong. It illustrates a lot of the other points, but I think it's just totally wrong on that side because you literally never get noise on 200 ISO. Same with 400. 400 ISO, you're probably never going to get any noise as well. You would get maybe like nothing at all actually. It would be brighter though. 800 ISO once again, not really going to get any noise with that. Maybe the faintest amount, but ultimately probably not. And then 800 ISO, that is going to be looking. You're not going to get any noise on that, but it will be quite bright. Then 1600 ISO, it is going to be quite noisy. You are starting to get some noise in the picture, and it might slightly affect the quality of the image as well. And then 3200 ISO, yeah, it is going to look like that. It's going to look really, really gritty. 6400, it's going to be like pure noise. So something to put in mind, guys. Something to take in mind. Moving on to lighting. Okay, so this is a very nice picture that I really like. Looks quite moody. It has a lot of atmosphere in it. It's something that I'm a big fan of. And so the point that I put for this was to avoid using the inbuilt flash in your camera, especially most times when doing night photography. Try to use the natural light to your advantage to notice the light in your surroundings, guys. So if you want to get out and do some night photography, I'd recommend having a camera that can get, or a lens that can get quite low f-stop. Um, but at the same time, um, just go out and see what you can take. And I think one of the beautiful things about night photography is that certain like the person who's viewing the picture already knows that it's night, obviously, so you can get away with certain stuff being dark. But if you can see the natural light source here is these lights going on these tables, and you can see how well lit all the tables are, but not the stuff around it. So that's a really good way that the person who took the photographer has utilized the natural light to create like a very moody kind of image. There's an Instagram page called Photo Cinematica, which I would definitely recommend checking out because they have some amazing film-like images. Like it's like photos, but they look very filmic. Um, and that's the kind of photography that I really like. Um, look outside, look for like neon lights because that's something that's going to be really um, essential to kind of help your nighttime photography. Something like a petrol station is perfect for nighttime photography because you'll notice yourself that everything around the petrol station might be dark, but the petrol station will have like big lights for the sign, and it'll have lights on all of the it'll have lights on the different lights on the different pumps, and you'll be able to kind of like I was saying, a petrol station is absolutely perfect for nighttime photography. Great way that you can use the natural light. Um, so yes, so Charlotte's saying, been looking at the ND folders. What do I think that ND2 and ND4 is probably fine for you to achieve long motion blur? Yeah, I would definitely say ND. If you stick around to until the second half of the session, Charlotte, I've actually got some ND filters that we can look at, and I'll let you know what ND filters we have actually as well. We need to get some more, or we need to get an adapter because they only fit some of our lenses. But I'll actually show you the NDs that we've got, and maybe that'll help you form your decision. But I would say definitely ND2. ND2 will 100% be fine. ND4 would probably be good, but I think that's going to be quite a bit darker, right? Bit more opaque. But I would say that it would be okay as well. But definitely, an ND, it's they're so good and they're so cheap that it's like it makes sense to use them. It just does. Um, so yeah, Amelia said we need to go, but watch this back. Can't wait to look at everyone's pics from the lighthouse and the beach. So yeah, absolutely fine, Amelia, no problem at all. Um, just get. Can I just ask Amelia? I'm not sure that I received yours and Andy's pics from the beach. I think that I've got Lee's, I've got Charlotte's, I got some Linda sent me, and I think also Lynn sent a few, but I'm not sure I got I'm not sure if I've got any pictures from you and Andy. I do have your pictures, Amelia, that you took on the camera, which I'm going to upload and I'll show those. And I've got Sue's as well from the camera, but from Andy's camera, I'm not sure I have those pics. Yeah, your pics are on my camera, Amelia. I mean, that's absolutely right. I'm going to upload those ones. I'm just not sure if I've got Andy's pictures on his camera. Um, if not, it's totally fine. Don't worry about it. I know you've got some great picks. But if you don't have time to upload it or anything, that's absolutely fine. You can send it to me at a later date. But maybe I just didn't see the email. Is in the would you be able to send the link at all to my Media Savvy email? So if you could share that with my Media Savvy email, because I don't think I got that. That's all, Amelia. Perfect. If you don't have time, that's absolutely fine. Just because I'm not sure it might be an issue with my. Oh, it's the same file as last time. Right, I'll try and dig it out. I'll have a look. If I can find it, then I'll make sure that I can upload them. But I'll have a look when we go for break. So thank you for that. Cool. That should be okay then, hopefully. Um, right, no worries. And obviously I can upload yours as well, Amelia. But that's absolutely perfect. So right, okay, yeah. So guys, we're talking about noticing the light. in your surroundings and just kind of using natural light to your advantage as well. Two things that are really going to boost your photography massively. Um, and then, okay, if we continue with this, saying that, yeah, so I've got lighting here, and obviously this image looks good because as we're talking about lighting, images can look quite flat if they're, especially if they're on just a flat background. As you can see, he's on just a white background here, but we've got some nice lighting to help him pop out of the image a little bit. Um, so as I was saying, guys, you want to try to use side lighting. Make sure it's not too much of a hard side light. If you've only got a one light setup, try to put the light on about 20 to 30 degrees from the on the side of the subject, but at the same time try to make it so it's not too hard, because if it is too hard, it's going to look quite dramatic. You're going to have quite like a dramatic effect, and that's not really what you want ultimately, because it might make the image look a bit too. You're going to make them look like it's part of like a fade lighting or something, so it's not ultimately what you want. But if you use side lighting, you can pop out the image instead of front lighting or overhead lighting. Talked about overhead lighting, obviously it's just going to make them look bleached out. But yeah, this can pop out your image and it can add more definition. So you can see that they've lit him on the left hand side, and you can see that it casts a bit of shadow on the right hand side. It gives him more definition to his nose here, and it also gives some more definition to the side of his face. You can see obviously that's quite dark there. And let's see, so yeah, and then obviously his ear is quite dark as well there, so that should all be absolutely fine. um, and it looks really cool, and it works really well as well. So yeah, as I was saying, guys, it's quite a nice picture there, and side lighting can have a really positive effect on your image, can make it look really nice. Okay, and here we go, we're going to go back onto this one here. This is one that I've spoke about quite a bit, and um, as we were saying, open doors, windows, whenever you're shooting against a light source, it's always going to be difficult. This image isn't too bad considering they've made the best of a bad situation. Um, we spoke about when's it a good time to use the inbuilt flash in your camera, or use like an internal flash, or even an external flash that you've bought. And generally speaking, um, it's good. It's not like you'd want to you want to use the natural light when you can, or at least use the light source that you have. So if you've got your own LEDs or something, I know that a lot of people in the session don't, but so that's why I suggest using natural light. Um, However, all phones have an inbuilt flash. Even most basic cameras usually do have an inbuilt flash. And when should we actually use those? Now, because they're not the greatest flash, I would generally say when you are compensating against heavy backlight. So if you have no choice, so the photographer in this situation has to get this shot of the dad walking in with the bride. So he has no choice but to shoot from this position. And now this position terrible because it's such a bright day, and he needs to expose for them. He can't expose for outside because they're going to be underexposed. So how is he going to counter that? How is he going to counter the massive overexposure on the outside? Well, what he's going to do is he's going to use the flash at the front of his camera, which is going to kind of light up these as well, allowing him to expose these two people here. So yeah, when you're compensating against heavy backlight, that can usually be a good time to help you um, light up your image. So if it's shooting through a door or something like that, that can be pretty useful, guys. Okay, so we have our mini quiz in a second. Um, so let's hope you're ready, guys, because we're going to be looking at the exposure triangle. Right, guys, so we'll just go straight into it. So, guys, who can tell me what is the exposure triangle? That was the first question. The last one, Lee answered it. He said that it is the ISO, it is the aperture, and it is the shutter speed, which is all right. So, great job to Lee for getting that. And who can tell me, why would somebody take a photo with a high shutter speed? Why would someone do that, guys? You can tell me, why would someone take a photo with a high shutter speed? Can you guys think, why would someone take a photo with a high shutter speed? A fast shutter speed even, let's say. So if we could get both answers even, so why would someone take one with a why would someone take a photo with a fast shutter speed, and why would somebody take a photo with a slow shutter speed? Who can tell me, guys? Let's see. Brilliant, excellent. So Lee, great answer there, mate. Well done. Yes, so someone would take a photo with a fast shutter speed because it's going to freeze the action. It's going to kind of freeze what's going on the screen, and it's going to kind of capture everything that's in the image. So if you're trying to get a picture of wildlife or something like that, it can be really useful for those kind of things. So that is probably why someone would take a photo with a fast shutter speed. Now, who can tell me why someone would take it with a slow shutter speed? Does anyone know why? And yeah, to replicate movement in motion. So that's kind of answers both questions really, Charlotte. So yeah, you're right there. So yeah, if someone was trying to get movement in motion for the fast shutter speed, that's right. But if you wanted to create like a motion blur, you might use a slow shutter speed. So that's also right there. So brilliant. So yeah, if you're shooting a waterfall, some fire, a windmill, we might want to use a slow shutter speed just to kind of create that motion blur, which can simulate the feeling of going fast. You can also do that with things like traffic. A lot of people use a slow shutter speed if they're at they're taking a picture of a crossroad or something like that, and that can give you that kind of effect as well. So that's a good one, Charlotte, that you might want to try. If you go to like a crossroad, don't go on the crossroad, but if you're on the side with your camera, and you're at like a traffic light stop, but it's like a crossroads as well, then when all the cars are going, if it's at night, if you have a low shutter speed, you'll be able to get the motion blur of the lights on the cars, and you can create like a really cool kind of picture with that. So that's something for you to look out for as well, Charlotte. Um, Okie dokie. So guys, why? Let's go on to the next question. Just give me a second. Okay, guys. So why would somebody take a picture with a high aperture, and then why would someone take a picture with a low aperture? Can anyone tell me the difference between those two? Like, why would someone choose to take a picture with a high aperture or a low aperture? Or should we say a narrow aperture and a wide aperture? Might be better to say. Obviously, we know it's going to affect our brightness, but there's another reason for why we might want to do that. Let's say. Yes, brilliant. So yes, it gives you more or less lighting, and it can create depth of field. So perfect, yeah. And awesome, good job, Lee, as well. So yeah, it varies depth of field, and it can adjust light which is coming in to the sensor. So both answers there are absolutely brilliant. So good job, guys. Well done to both of you there. That I would take both answers there. Perfect, brilliant, good job, guys. Okay, so what is ISO? Who can tell me what ISO is? Because ISO is also something that's very important when we're filming, or when we're, when we're not filming, when we're taking photos. Sorry. How to adjust the exposure of the picture? Yes, or yeah, in a sense, you're definitely adjusting the exposure when you're adjusting the aperture. So you can say that it is adjusting the exposure. You can say it's just adjusting the brightness ultimately as well. So you're definitely just adjusting the brightness or the exposure. So good job there, Charlotte. And guys, what can happen if you raise the ISO too high? So if you put the ISO too high, what's going to happen, guys? Who can tell me? creates grain in the picture. Perfect, Charlotte. Charlotte and Lee, you guys are doing so good. You're absolutely killing this. So well done, guys. Very, very happy with the answers that you guys have been given so far. Um, Very, very good job, guys. Okay, and then the last two questions that we've got here, guys. Why would we ever avoid using the flash, the inbuilt flash in the camera? What would, it's a little bit of a hard one, this one. Why would we ever avoid using the flash in the camera? This one's a little bit tougher, but give it a shot, guys. Let me know what you think. So it's a harsh, flat light. Yes, brilliant. That's so good, Lee. That's perfect. Yeah, it's quite a harsh light, and it's coming from a direct source as well because it's from your camera. It's coming straight on. So it's flat. You're not getting any definition. You're just getting straight on the image. If you've got an underexposed image, it can be useful just for like a quick help, like just to help you get the image exposed. But in terms of like definition on an image, it's not really going to give you that. It will give you exposure, which can be a lifesaver sometimes if that's all you need. But at the same time, it's not going to give you anything that's going to add any kind of real definition perfectly. So why is it a good idea to light from the side? Who can tell me that? Why is it a good idea to light from the side, guys? So we kind of spoke about it a little bit there. Yeah, brilliant. Excellent, Charlotte. So to create interesting lighting and shadows. Exactly right. So you can create kind of interesting effects just by using the light and the shadows. And exactly what you're just saying there, Charlotte. So um, side lighting can give you a nice kind of shadowed effect. Obviously, I know that I think in the next lesson after this, we might look at it a little bit. I know you guys are wanting some new content, obviously, in the second half as well. So we will, but maybe at the very end of the session, if we still have a little bit of time, we will cover some of the equipment again. Um, but yeah, obviously, the interesting thing about the next session coming up as well, guys, is because obviously I'm going to bring the equipment that we've got down or whatever equipment I can. Obviously, there's a limited amount of space here, and we're gonna have a little play on that. But the good thing about that is that we've learned about most of the equipment. So when I bring it down, I'm gonna quiz you guys and ask you what things are, um, and see if you can remember from the third session, I believe, what everything is. I'll be very impressed if you guys can remember. Um, but yeah, it should be fun for us to have a little bit of a play. Um, and yeah, we'll have a little go on that. But yeah, as I was saying, so lighting from the side definitely give you a bit of definition, but try to make sure that it's not going to be too harsh, because if it is too harsh, then you're going to come away with something that looks a bit too dramatic, which is why, when possible, the optimum type of lighting that you want is like 3-point lighting, which I know we talked about a little bit in the third session, which is where you have lighting from the side, which you would call your key light. You have a smaller light from the opposite side, which is going to be your fill light, and it's going to add just a little bit of definition to that. And then you are going to have your backlight, which is another light which is projecting onto the background, which is going to give you that kind of more, it's going to light up the back and it's going to help the back be better exposed as well. And that is usually the optimum lighting you would go for in a kind of portrait setup, or maybe in like an interview setup as well, if you were doing an interview for somebody. But if you don't have access to that, even a one light setup can still be useful as well, just depending on the circumstance. So yeah, guys, as I was saying, for the second half of the session, I am going to kind of upload some of these um, pictures, and we're going to look at some of the beach pictures that we took from last week. Once we've had a look through those, I'm going to get some of the kit out. I'm going to quiz you guys on bits and bobs of the kit, and we can have a little look through that together. And then once we've done that, guys, we might review some of the stuff that we learned in the third slide, but we might not have time as well. But yeah, you did amazing on the quiz there, so thank you very much, Charlotte, and thank you very much, Lee, as well, because you guys did a great job. And yeah, we're going to have a look at some of the pictures that we took, and this is going to be the last photography session, guys. So thank you for joining, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to join. I wish we could do more. As I said, if you guys are interested, we will probably do the advanced photography taster. I know that sorry, I know that Amelia and Andy were saying that they really didn't want the course to end. Obviously, I really enjoy teaching it as well, but we will probably do an advanced photography taster. In that, don't know, I'm not sure when it would be. Maybe we'll be able to have that in the classroom. But if it's going to be quite soon, it may need to be virtual. But if so, we'll look at some more of the more complex stuff around the cameras. So we'll look at the kind of more about lenses and things like that we didn't really cover too much, and more about some more specific stuff. But you're interested about that, Charlotte? Well, that's great, because I think that will actually I think that would be really cool. I'd really like to do that as well. So we'll see. And then if not that, then as I mentioned, we will do the videography course, which is probably going to be like video production is what I was thinking, where we can kind of cover everything from pre-production, so like things like storyboarding, shot lists, risk assessments, recce checklists, all the things that you do, even idea generation, and like how you would create an idea for a piece. We can cover all of those different things, and then we could go into the actual production aspect, where we would like go out and shoot something. Maybe we would make like a mini short film together or something like that. And obviously I would do a workshop on lighting, where we could actually bring some of the lights down and stuff. I think that there's so much content there for us to do, if we do a videography course as well. So hopefully that will be something else if you guys are interested in. And as I was saying, I think it would definitely complement the photography course as well, because they do really go hand in hand. So I think that everything that you've learned in this course, if you go on to do the video production stuff with us afterwards, it definitely is going to help, because you've learned about basic lighting principles. You've learned about the exposure triangle, which is something that you would need. And I think that you would be able to pick it up quite easy. So yeah, guys, plenty stuff going on. Otherwise, you're interested in the video course as well, Charlotte? That's perfect. Because yeah, like I said, guys, we do have the and oh, so Linda, I think you're just catching up a bit to catch an action shot. That was for fast shutter speed, right? I think that your stream might be slightly behind, Linda, but if you if when you catch up, then that is the right answer for fast shutter speed. That is absolutely right. Okay, cool, guys. So we're going to go in a sec, but we're going to be back at maybe about 1:05, just because it might take me a little while just to do some of the stuff, because I've still got to upload some of the pics, and I've still got to go and get bits and bobs of the kit. So bear with me, but roughly 1:05. Just be back here on YouTube, and I'll see all of you guys then. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, something that I have been forgetting to plug a little bit in these sessions is the survey. So it'll be the same survey for both sessions. So it's going to be the same survey for this session and for part two. I'm just doing it as one survey, even though there's two different parts. But make sure that you get that done, guys, because I have been forgetting a little bit about the survey in these sessions. So I'm actually going to put my tilt my laptop screen slightly down, because it looks like I'm just like a floating head. It's just noticed that it's like way tilted over. You just see my my head. Yeah. So that's a bit better. But yeah, as I said, get that survey done, guys. Obviously, I'm almost guaranteed that if you've done any of our courses, you've done at least one of these surveys by now. So I don't need to tell you what to do. But yeah, that would be perfect. Otherwise, I think that is about it, guys. Enjoy your lunch, and I will see you in the second half of the session for all the fun stuff we've got planned. But yeah, thank you very much for joining today, guys. If you do have any questions, just get them in now because I'm going to go very shortly. But I will be available the next minute or so just to kind of answer any questions if you've got anything that you're dying to ask. But if not, guys, courses, more courses. Um, Probably, yeah. As I was saying, Amelia, there's the potential for us to do an advanced photography taster, which I was mentioning there. And if we do that, then you would of course be eligible to do that, and it would be a nice carry on from this course as well. So that's definitely available. And also there's going to be a video production course coming most likely very shortly soon. So you're most welcome to do that, and I'm sure there's like a ton of stuff that we can cover for that. Um, and as I was saying there as well, a lot of the stuff that you've learned in this class would definitely be relevant if you go on to do the video course. And it's something that I would love teaching because it's like, it's my bread and butter, so I'm all about video stuff. Okay, cool. I think that is about it, guys. I'm going to go and get some lunch and take a little break, but I'm also going to get things prepared for the second half. We'll be back around 1:05, roughly. But yeah, thank you for joining us, guys, and I'll see you in a couple of hours. And then that's our final session, guys, for photography. I know it's really, really sad, and I wish that we could do it every week. But as I said, we're going to have more stuff coming up. Right, I'm going to go before I start waffling, guys. Okie dokie. Make sure to do the survey. I'll be back in an hour, so I'm not going to be gone for long. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in, guys, and see you in a little bit.